Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of Ambush. This is a new weekly podcast that goes for about 15 minutes. With me, I have my co-host Will from Dest Friends. Will, how are you going?
Going pretty well, Clint. How you going?
I am excellent. I've got my coffee in hand and ready to talk about what's happened in the Destiny world this week. So we'll jump straight into it. We've only got 15 minutes. I thought we'd look at, with Gencon happening over the weekend, we'd do a quick recap of Gencon. What have you heard about Gencon this week, Will?
I heard not so much initially. I watched the finals sort of play out in the group chats, but I only recently sort of looked over the top 8 and top 32 results, and it looks really diverse, which I think is great for the game. But I'm really happy that sort of my deck got represented, and a few other sort of things.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there about diversity. I think just quickly looking over the list, I think it's pretty safe to say there's maybe 10 to 12 different decks represented in the top 32, with it looks like predominantly the pairing of Yoda Cassian coming hot out of the gates and just basically dominating that top 32, as is pretty apparent in the top 8 where there were 3 Yoda, Cassian, Anakin Mill decks. So the Millpocalypse is upon us. What's your take on that?
I think it is. It's good to see, Mill coming through as a sort of really competitive standing. Obviously, it hasn't really happened before in the game, except with Thronka, which immediately got nerfed. So hopefully we don't immediately see this character combination get nerfed. I know that the designers have said, in the past, we don't really want to take Mill to every top 8 of every event sort of thing. We don't think that's good for the game, but I think it should have its day in the sun. And the archetype's pretty interesting as well. It's pretty diverse sort of dice. Allows for a lot of interesting upgrades. I don't think anyone thought the pod racer would get played, and now the pod racer is getting played. So I think that's good. Anything that surprises the people who think they know everything about the game, I think is good.
It's going to be very interesting to see how the meta plays out, or how the meta responds to Yoda, Cassian, or Mill in general. I mean, we didn't really see a lot of the other Mill decks, like Leia Yoda, which was probably the other predominant Mill deck that people were thinking about playing. But it looks like the Yoda Cassian has just dominated Gencon there.
I think having access to things like Second Chance, Hyperspace Jump, and the sort of Blue Hero removal suite just pushes that over the top at the moment. Maybe Luke Yoda or Leia Yoda or Leia Luke might see a resurgence in Legacy's rotation, but I think while Second Chance exists, those yellow hero decks are going to be much better at milling.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see once rotation hits and all these above the curve cards leave the game, what the game is going to look like. It'll probably, I would imagine, play a lot more fair and a lot harder to break.
Yeah. I think no one really enjoys the fact that Second Chance is an interesting card in damage matchups. It creates the I can live a bit longer at the end, or if you go after my yellow character first, I can sort of stall you out a bit. But against, if you're playing Mill, it's here's my extra 5 health. That's all it means. Here's my extra 5 health.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's coming through, what the difference I mean there, but it's much more of a sort of less dynamic and interesting card in there.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at that 3-wide Mill deck as being 27 health, and then you add a couple of second chances in there. I mean, you've got to battle
Maybe
through
a Rebel.
37. Yeah, you've got to battle through 37 health. Yeah, it's definitely one of those cards that pushes that Mill combination over the edge, combined with all of Blue's great mitigation.
Yeah.
But let's move on to a couple of decks. You mentioned Yoda Cassian before. I know it's a deck that you've been playing for quite a bit. The previous meta you were playing Hondo Cassian, and you're
Yoda
now
Hondo.
playing Yoda Hondo, sorry. And now you're playing Yoda Cassian. Do you want to tell us a bit about that and how you've migrated your Yoda Hondo deck across to Yoda Cassian?
Yeah, with store champs coming up for people, I think it's probably pretty important to know how to play against the sort of damage version of the Yoda Cassian, so you don't sit down against someone playing like Elite Yoda, Elite Cassian, Frozen Wastes, and think like, oh, maybe it's Mill. Just always keep it in the back of your mind. Even if they take the command center battlefield, they could just be playing the damage version. And it's really, I think of it as a natural evolution of sort of Yoda Hondo, like really oppressive, a lot of early damage. And I really like it. I've been playing a lot of it. I think the crucial cards to sort of watch out for are like the all-ins and the impulsives. So I play it as Yoda Cassian Elite, and I play sort of X8s, Force Waves, Force Speeds, Cunnings, and then I really just I'm looking to draw into those big combo pieces with all my dice out and do probably upwards of 10 damage with a few spreads from Cassian in a turn, in a sort of round. So if you know how to play against that, if you hold on to your friends and play them when you think they have the combo, then that's a good way to get around that deck. Also, if you do more than 5 damage to Yoda turn 1, you put a serious clock on the deck's efficiency. So I would be aiming to do that if you sit down across someone playing Yoda Cassian damage. That's my sort of lightning fast review of that deck. Also, watch out for Beguile.
Beguile is very, very nice. So I've played a few games with this, and like as I was saying to you before we started the podcast this morning, its burst potential and consistency is amazing, but it's balanced out by the fact that it can just get aggroed down. You've only got
any deck.
You've only got a 20. Yeah, you've only got 20 hit points, and then if you draw bad as well, like if you don't hit your 4 speeds, you're gonna have a rough time until you draw into those 4 speeds. And then, as you said before, if someone lays 5 health or 5 damage into Yoda, and then you draw into a 4 speed round 3, like you're
not playing that 4 speed.
No.
That 4 speed is a heavy reroll.
Yeah, exactly. So your damage output actually goes down and your consistency goes down if you don't draw into that 4 speed. So if you're wanting to play Yoda Cassian, what is your ideal opening hand?
If you're playing this deck, mulligan heavily for 4 speed and at least 1 damage upgrade. If you're playing other guns, mulligan for other guns like the CR2 or the DL44. I play X8s. I sort of pretty heavily mulligan for them. If you're against a 3-wide, I would even pitch the 4 speed and go for the 5-card mulligan for the Force Wave, because that card will just win you the game.
Yeah.
They won't be able to play a 2-cost upgrade on turn 1 because they'll be worried about removing your Force Wave, and then maybe they get some resources and play it at the end, but by that stage, like, you've already won the game if you've played it turn 1, action 1 sort of thing. If you're against a yellow hero, maybe even mulligan for 2 to avoid the scruffy.
Yeah, that's fair. All I know is that it's like 2 of those Yoda Cassian damage decks made top 16 at Worlds. The builds from Gencon were slightly different to the build that you and I have been playing. They focus more on ranged upgrades with no Force Waves, which I wonder if they actually included Force Waves as a meta call. They might have actually top 8'd or had a good chance at taking out the top, or at least top 2 there anyway.
Yeah, I think if you're playing Yoda at the moment in any variation of a deck, you're playing vehicles, you're playing whatever, you just one of Force Wave.
Yeah, agreed.
Right? Just so that you have the chance, if you come up against a 3 or 4 wide Rando Calrissian deck, you're just like, all right, let's just hard mulligan for that Force Wave and see if I can win the game for free.
Agreed. All right, well, let's move on from there. Another thing I wanted to touch on quickly was there's been a lot of talk about Kylo 2 in the meta, and based on the results of Gencon, we only see 2 Kylo 2 prices in the top 32, with only one making its way to the top 8 and bailing out there. So it looks like, even though it's a very, very strong deck, we didn't have a high representation of mono-colored decks within that top 32, which might be a meta call based on the fact that Kylo Price or Kylo 2X was doing so well in previous store champs. Do you think this is going to be the same moving forward? Do you think people are going to move away from playing Kylo for this exact reason?
I think if you're thinking of playing a 2-character villain deck, and you're thinking like you want to have sort of the big bad dynamic duo, regardless of what other people are playing, Kylo is really strong. Like, he's got 50% damage sides, he's got 12 health for 17 points, and then the ability, I always think of the ability as like a freebie upgrade, right? Like, if you come up against a monocolor, you do better, right? But if you come up against a rainbow, he still does well, because he's still like really aggressively costed. That being said, I think this is exactly what's going to happen. If people don't see a lot of monocolor, they won't play Kylo, even though I think is still a really good choice. But they just won't play him because they'll use the lack of monocolor decks as a good opportunity to experiment with sort of other character combinations. That's my thoughts anyway. Yeah,
and if we start seeing the rise of Mono Blue Hero again, which, to be fair, is what we saw at the start of the last meta, the Legacies meta. Everyone was playing Kylo, and then no one played mono-colored decks, and then Mono kind of like rose back up, and then Kylo quickly followed behind it. So we might see the same cycle, for lack of a better term, in the way of the Force meta as well.
Yeah. I know that some people playing mono, for example, shout out to James, who won our locals on Tuesday night. He was playing Mono Blue Hero, and he just played around the Kylo ability by taking a lot of shields. He beat 2 Kylos that night.
Wow.
So he was playing Luke Ezra, and he just took a lot of shields to sort of give himself that bit of extra health.
Wow, that's awesome. Because that doesn't have a high health pool either. Like, you're only looking at 20 points there, so well done for getting through 2 Kylo prices. And maybe people have started to finally figure out Blue Hero in this meta, and Kylo is now inherently weaker against it because people know how to that. Yeah, because he knows how to. Everyone's starting to learn with the new Blue Hero decks how to play around it. Like, you've got so much action cheating in the Blue Hero that the 2 damage, like, you can actually even burst down Kylo round 2 now, if not early round 3.
Yeah, and you can put pressure, which means they won't have access to those ancient sabers they've played and stuff like that. Like, even if you don't kill Kylo, he'll be sitting there like cycling his ancients or something like that, rather than just sitting there with like 3 upgrades until round 3. You're like, oh, okay, great.
Yeah. All right, well, we've got a couple of minutes left, so let's move on to our local scene. So within Australia this weekend, we've got 4 store champs that I have managed to record down. So we've got one in Sydney at Good Games Town Hall, and there's one in Cairns, both of those being played on Saturday. And then on Sunday, there is a store champs at Next Level Games in Melbourne, and one in Perth, which I'm going to assume is at Good Games Cannington, but I'm not too sure. Someone might want to correct me on that. So our very own Blake from Destiny Downunder will be playing in Perth. Jacob and myself will be playing at Good Games Town Hall. Do you have any meta predictions post Gencon for the local Australian meta?
Oh, look, I think a lot of people will be playing Mill. Like, if you don't have a clear strategy against how to beat Yoda Cassian Mill or like Yoda Cassian Anakin Mill, get one ASAP. Just look up some videos about people playing it, see what they think is weak, and yeah, do that.
Yeah. I definitely think you're right. I think we're definitely going to see some Yoda Cassian Anakin Mill. I think we're going to see some Mother Talzin Commandos 3-wide.
Yep.
Probably, I'm not too sure on the hero vehicles part. Because Mill is there, hero vehicles might be a suboptimal choice to bring to a store champs this weekend. But I know we have some very good
hero vehicles
players which might be able to play around that. I mean, the thing I've realised about the Australian meta is that it gives me nightmares trying to figure out what to play, because everyone just plays whatever the hell they want. They don't really care what is happening in the rest of the world. So it's very difficult to predict what you're going to see. So I guess as far as meta predictions go and what to play to counter that, bring whatever you're best at playing.
Yeah, I think good advice for tournaments is to bring what you feel best on. Like, obviously try and get some practice in on those really strong decks beforehand. So a really strong deck is what you feel best on. But at the end of the day, like, you know, we could go around the Sydney scene and pick out a lot of players who we know are going to play certain types of decks, like hero vehicles resident players, like villain aggro players and stuff like that. And we at least in Sydney, we have such a spread representation of players, and they're all like very good, like very sort of near that top level of skill, or near equal levels in skill anyway. So there's no point trying to sort of predict, oh, everyone's going to play Kylo Price, because there are people that'll never play Kylo Price and stuff like that. I think, yeah, just play what you're best at and go in with the mindset that you want to win and that you want to do your best. You're not there to have fun, you're there to win.
Yeah, I put out a call on Facebook yesterday or the day before just about what people from around Australia thought might show up. Des, who's in the Perth meta, says that he predicts Mill and vehicles with the normal smattering of Hero Blue and Talzin that plagues Perth. So I think they've got a meta of about 20 to 30 players throughout all of Perth. But obviously, they have specific players that like playing their specific archetypes, regardless of what the meta is showing. So it might be easier to call your local meta, but as a whole, probably a lot more difficult.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so let's move on from there. So just good luck to everyone at their store champs this weekend. Make sure you get in touch with us and let us know how you went so we can review it next week on episode 2 of Ambush. Will, you just wanted to touch on a competitive mindset. So going into a store champs, what is the mindset that you want to have?
Well, this actually came down to the rise of sort of Yoda Cassian Anakin Mill. I did have someone sort of talk to me and say, oh, look, I want to play this, but like maybe I don't want to play the deck that just won at Gencon. Like, I don't want to be that guy, sort of thing. And look, I'm not there to tell anyone how to live their lives, but if you want to go to a competition, and like, you know, there's only so many competitions every year, right? Like, you can play for fun every week, you can experiment every week, but if you in yourself you have that inkling that you want to play a meta deck and you want to just see how far you can take it, you want to test your skills with like sort of the what's been shown to be a pretty good deck, just do it. Don't hesitate, just go in balls to the wall. Like, and if people come up to you and they're like, oh, you're just playing that because it won at Gen Con, just turn around and be like, yeah I am, I really wanted to see how well I could do with it, sort of thing. Like, don't be shy. Just win games.
Not pointing fingers at Dave.
Well, I didn't say his name, but
yeah, I'm not going to be as diplomatic about it. No, I think you're exactly right. I think people need to get off this whole net decking sort of train that they jump on. I think if you want to like, some of us aren't great deck builders, and the only way that we can play competitive decks is by taking what's popular and maybe changing 2 to 4 cards to suit our own personal playstyles. And realistically, if you look at something like Blue Hero, I mean, 26 of the cards are pretty much the same anyway. So, you don't have a lot of variety, and I do think a lot of people need to get off that train. With going in, like with store champs as well, I think you mentioned it, excuse me, a little while ago about getting those pre-tournament nerves, and people outside of Australia that might be listening to this going, oh, you're only talking about store champs. What people outside of Australia need to realize is store champs are our Gencon.
We don't have anything else.
To a certain degree. I mean, we get regionals and we get nationals, but we don't get big competitive events like Gencon as well. So
you get like 6 store champs a year if you live in Sydney. Use them to the best of your ability.
And we get 1 regionals that we can go to, and we also have a nationals, but that nationals might be on the other side of Australia, which might not be feasible or financially feasible for people to get to. Without much preparation. So, I mean, for me going into a store champs, I'm always pretty nervous heading into that first game. And even if I get a win or a loss on that first game, the competitive nerves have dropped a little bit, just because you've kind of warmed yourself up, and then you just refocus, and head into the next match, going, you've got to win this. Just like get into the zone and try not to make mistakes.
Try not to make mistakes is a big one, and be constantly reviewing, like sort of what's in your hand, what's in your deck, and how far away is your win condition. Sort of thing.
I actually think what some people don't do enough is check their opponent's discard pile. That's a habit that I've gotten myself into. Like, at least once a round, I'll be checking their discard pile, especially later in the game from round 3 onwards, to see what mitigation they've chucked, and what mitigation they might potentially have in their hand, how much is left in their deck, so what's the percentage that they might actually be holding on to that second easy pickings. If they've got 15 cards in their deck still, and 5 in their hand and 10 in their discard, and 1's in the discard pile, there's a high probability they might not actually have that easy pickings in their hand. So you can make a fair estimate of what mitigation you might be up against. All right, we've gone severely over time, which is pretty typical for a Destiny Down Under podcast. Any final words there, Will?
No, I just, everyone this weekend, good luck, have fun. I won't be playing, so play for me. Someone play Yoda Cassian Damage. Win games.
Win games, win Town Hall. Good luck to everyone who is competing in the store champs this weekend. We are very interested to hear what wins, especially a week out from Gencon. Also want to give a shout out to the Perth Jawas. These guys are very big in the Perth scene, and they give of their time to set up live streams for Destiny. And it's not only Destiny, I believe they cover X-Wing and other games as well. So once we get a link for that, I'll post that on the Destiny Down Under page, so people can follow the Perth Store Championships on Sunday as well.
Yeah, really excited to see how they go.
Yeah. So again, good luck to everyone. Shout out to the Dest Friends and my other co-hosts, Jacob and Blake. Thanks for listening, and we will be back next Thursday with more Destiny news. Thanks for your time, Will.
Thanks.